Hello everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Snyder, and I currently serve as the Event Management Manager of the Iowa State University Memorial Union, and I'm also pursuing my master's degree in Event Management from Iowa State University. With some support and assistance from Dr. Eric Olson, I wrote the case study, Memorial Union Events, Staying Relevant and Sustainable. And I drew the inspiration from this case study from some of the challenges and opportunities that we face as an event venue. So much of the data and the policies are accurate information, but some parts of the case study scenario are also hypothetical. So a little bit of background information and an introduction about the Memorial Union. We opened in 1928, so we have been operating for over 90 years now, and we have had 11 additions to the space. So we've updated services, updated event spaces, and we have grown as the student body has grown. So we're just over 316,000 square feet with 25 event spaces, and we host roughly 14,000 events per year. We are also an auxiliary, which means that we receive funding from student fees and from the Office of the President to help support some of those building operations and offset the cost of hosting some of those events. And lastly, we are dedicated to the Iowa State University mission of teaching, research, and service. So university-related activities are given priority. Here is a breakdown of the events that we host in the building. So like I mentioned, we're usually around 14,000 events per year, or at least prior to COVID we were. So as you can see, university departments, they are typically about 2/3 of the events hosted within the building. And then student orgs are normally around 1/3 of the events, or just under 1/3. So those two together are typically around 97% of the events. We also have some non-university events, so public rentals, and those have ranged between a little bit less than 1% up to 1.69%. And then we also have weddings in the building. And as you can see, our wedding reception and ceremony numbers have trended downward from 101 to 53 over the last 3 years. So we are seeing a little bit of a downward trend there. But overall, we're normally around that 14,000 mark. So to continue with the breakdown, university departments can reserve space up to 3 years in advance, and many of their programs are hosted during business hours, so Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. when a lot of the staff are already on campus. And with student organizations, they can request space up to 1 year in advance, and many of their events are during the nighttime or on the weekends. And both of those groups receive free room rates and large discounts on AV packages and event equipment. As I mentioned before, we do receive funding from the Office of the President to help offset some of those fees. So that reimbursement is around $1.4 million, and over the last 3 years, we have offered discounts of $2.3 million, $2.6 million, and most recently $3 million. So the number, or the discounts that we've offered, has continued to grow, but we're not recouping those fees. We're getting the same $1.4 million reimbursement. And then lastly, with non-university events and weddings, they can request space as far in advance as they would like to, but one of the challenges is with limited availability. Like I said, 97% of our events are university department or student organization events, so they really do fill up our space, especially during weekdays, weeknights, weekends, especially within the next year. With those public rentals, they can hold space for 2 weeks, and then they must make a full payment to reserve this space. This table here goes through the net sales for the events. So we've had an average of right around $208,000 for the last 3 fiscal years. For departments, they've ranged from $93,000 up to $149,000. Student orgs have been pretty steady around the $30,000 mark, and non-university events have ranged from $10,000 up to $26,000. And then lastly, with weddings, the number of weddings has been trending downward, so along with that, the number of revenues and profits that we've been bringing in from weddings has trended downward from $58,000 down to $23,000. But overall, right around that $208,000 mark. So within this case study, the The case study problem is that in July of 2019, the director of the Memorial Union, Sawyer Williamson, comes to Aubrey Sabin, who oversees the event management office, and informs her that funding will be getting cut and she'll need to bring in $300,000 in net sales for fiscal year 21. So about $100,000 more than they're currently bringing in. And he leaves it to her to figure out a business plan to bring in $300,000 for the next fiscal year. So Sabin goes back and reviews some of the potential revenue streams, weddings being one of those. The Memorial Union is a very popular venue for ISU students, staff, and alumni. Many of the students do spend quite a bit of time in the building during their time at Iowa State, so it's a really great market to get to those students and the staff and alumni and try and get them to come back to the building. The Memorial Union did have a hotel for about 90 years, and it did close down in 2016. So part of the bookings and revenue going downward could be related to the hotel closing. The closest hotel is roughly 2 miles away, and Ames does not have a shuttle service. So that is a pain point for a lot of the customers that are looking to book weddings within the venue. The wedding coordinator, Jenna Easley, has been trying to create some new initiatives over the last year to increase those wedding bookings. So the MU now offers decoration setup and tear down at $25 an hour, a lit backdrop rental, charger rentals, and chair cover rentals. They've also invested in premium marketing packages on the knot and wedding wire, so trying to increase exposure and some of the promotional items and materials seen online. And lastly, they have attended 2 wedding expos and hosted 1 wedding expo for the first time in 8 years, and that wedding expo ended up bringing in just under $6,000, so an opportunity there to host future wedding expos. Some of the policies focused around weddings sometimes feel like they are a little bit hindering to couples. So since the building is such a high traffic space and there's events happening Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, the couples only get access to the venue from 10 a.m. to midnight on the day of their wedding. ISU Catering is the exclusive caterer for the building. They have a contract, so any events happening within the building have to go through ISU Catering. And lastly, there are not many free parking options close to the building. There is some side street parking, but there's not a lot, so the next best option is the parking ramp next to the MU, but guests do incur fees. So those are a few items that we often receive negative feedback from the couples on. Next, this table goes through some more of the potential revenue stream options. So like we just talked about with weddings, the requests are typically coming in 6 to 18 months out for 150 to 400 people. Typical wedding brings in around $2,000 to $4,000, and they're often looking for ballroom spaces. And since Saturdays are very popular days to have events, oftentimes the spaces and dates that they're looking for are already booked. Another potential revenue stream could be non-university conferences. Oftentimes these requests are made 6 to 24 months out for 50 to 350 people, often bringing in around $1,500 to $4,000, and they're looking for ballrooms and large meeting rooms. And again, just with the number of events from student orgs and departments, most times those spaces are already booked, so we have to turn those away. Another revenue stream option could be non-university information fairs, corporate sessions, and interviews. Those requests are usually made 2 to 8 weeks out for 15 to 100 people, bringing in $90 to $500, and they're often looking for smaller, large meeting rooms. Sometimes those spaces are booked, but oftentimes we're able to find a room and get them into the building. Next, we have non-university graduation parties, birthday parties, or reunions. Those requests are usually made 1 to 5 months out for 25 to 200 people, bringing in around $150 to $500, and they're looking for small or large meeting rooms. And again, sometimes those spaces are booked, but most times we're able to find them a room that will satisfy their needs. And then lastly, we have non-university business meetings. That could be like a law firm or a financial firm. So those are typically 1 to 4 weeks out for 10 to 20 people. $70 to $200 of revenue, and they're looking for small meeting rooms. So it's very, very rare that we cannot find a space for their event. In addition to those revenue streams, Sabin looks into some potential policy and pricing changes. Some of the options would be to allow student organizations and departments to only book 1 year in advance, and that would open up some of those dates that are more than 12 months out, hopefully getting more weddings and non-university conferences and events into the books. Another option would be to charge student orgs and departments a copay method. So it'd be roughly $100 for ballrooms, $50 for large meeting rooms, and $15 for small meeting rooms. And again, this could be a combination of only allowing them to book 1 year out and only charging departments, or charging departments and student orgs. So we can mix some of these things up here. And the third option would be to charge student orgs and departments according to the length of their reservation. So a certain price for up to 4 hours, for up to 8 hours, and then 8+ hours. And then lastly, creating more standard room setups and charging customers for alternative setups. When any company is making changes to policies and pricings, we know that there is going to be a big impact on the customers. So in this case study, it reviews some of the potential impacts. With university departments, the event management office did do some research, and the research showed that the proposed copay method amounts of $100, $50, and $15 would still be about 2 to 3 times less than other venues on campus or within the Ames community. And from having a few conversations with frequent users of this space, they weren't super happy or excited about the proposed changes, but they understand that the MU has not charged in over 90 years, and in order to be sustainable and continue serving all of the campus partners, we need to be making money and be sustainable as well. And lastly, departments voiced that they would expect a higher level of customer service and support, along with higher quality event furniture and AV equipment if prices did increase. In this case study, the student government president, Austin Graves, also caught wind of the potential policy changes and price increases, and expressed how charging these fees would impact student orgs with the least amount of funding. That would mean less events would be possible for all of the 900+ student orgs on campus, and we would be opposing the university mission of serving students in university-related activities. So taking all of this into account, Sabin has to figure out what changes are going to be made and how is she going to mend some of those customer relationships that are going to be impacted by these changes. So the case study looks to the reader to ask, should she shorten some of the reservation policies to just 1 year out and increase the pricing for student orgs and departments, or should it just be focused maybe on departments? If so, how will this affect some of those customer relationships, and how will she continue to have strong relationships even with having these hard conversations? What non-university events should she focus on? Maybe it should be weddings, maybe it should be conferences, information fairs, graduation parties, or business meetings, or maybe there's a segment that she's not thinking about and she is missing. What could she do to attract more weddings to the venue? The hotel is no longer there, but maybe there's some other areas where the MU could focus on highlighting some of their competitive advantages that they do have. And then lastly, how can she create a business plan to bring in $300,000 for fiscal year 21? So this leaves it up to the reader to try and brainstorm and get creative with some of those policy changes and pricing changes, and seeing what you can do to meet that $300,000 mark. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you listening to this case study, and like I said, these are some of the challenges and opportunities that we do face at the Iowa State University Memorial Union. So if you have any questions or suggestions and creative ideas on what we could do, feel free to reach out to me. My email is listed below here. And again, I appreciate you joining and thank you for your time. Bye, everyone.